ARENA acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present and recognise that Australia's path to net zero runs through First Nations lands. ARENA envisions a future where clean energy strengthens connection to country and First Nations communities thrive as owners, partners, and proud custodians of the clean energy transition. Welcome to ReWired, the podcast spotlighting the Australians turning big clean energy ideas into real-world impact. From ambition to action, these are the people rewiring our future.
Alex Grant, welcome to the program, and thanks so much for being here to talk to us about the transport sector. But can you tell us about your role and what the transport sector means for ARENA?
Thanks, Danny. So I'm the General Manager of Transport at ARENA, and it's my job to lead a team that focus on a couple of areas on creating in new investment into projects, supporting our portfolio of companies and sharing the insights, and also working with government and industry to ensure that we're headed in the right direction. So I guess you could say my job is to connect the dots and to make sure that transport decarb initiatives are moving in the right direction.
Quite a weighty role for the country right now with the sort of heightened fuel security questions, and a lot there. Like, you have to do a bunch of stuff with government, with companies, large and small, I'm assuming, and also understand the finance piece of it. How did you come to this role? It's an unusual job. What does a young man like you do to get such a great...
It is a varied role, you're right. So I came through studying commerce and did a very typical path through accounting and corporate finance, where I worked on quite a few areas. So you could call me a generalist. I've then arrived at large Australian property developer, and that was a good education in doing big deals, tight timeframes, and working with big corporates. And then in 2018, I guess I was fortunate for two reasons. The first is there just weren't that many energy transition professionals in the market. And also ARENA was building out its investments team. So I was managed to jump across into the energy transition area. Fortunately, I've been here for just over 8 years and been focused on transport for the last 4.
Well, congrats. And it's great that we've got you to drive transport, drive the nation, as we'll discuss. But tell me what a day in the life of Alex Grant looks like. How does it roll when you roll into work to do all these complex things?
Yeah, there's no typical day, but when your KPI is driving impact, I think that gives you a long rope to go and find the things that really move the needle. So on one day, it could be finding wonderful startups and companies doing innovative things and helping them get through our investment process. The other, it could be hosting an event or convening a group that need to talk to each other, because part of this is not just funding projects, but also driving those insights and sharing those learnings. So quite a varied area, but good fun.
Well, it's a big job managing transport for the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, particularly in sort of the current days of energy security and fuel security environment being heightened with the war in Iran. Can you tell me a little bit more about the programs that ARENA's got on offer for transport sector transformation?
Yeah, so ARENA provides grant funding to projects that are looking to attack pre-commercial challenges and solve some of the technical and commercial issues that we're seeing in the transition. We do this through various programs, and for our electrification of transport initiatives, we use the Driving the Nation program as our key area to do this. If you go to our website on arena.gov.au, you'll see more of the detail around what are the areas we're focusing on. But today, those focus areas are really targeted on fleets, on charging infrastructure, and then also innovation and vehicle to grid.
So fleets, fleet owners, charging infrastructure, and then innovation in the vehicle to grid space specifically, or innovation all over?
It's there. So innovation, because we just don't know what we don't know. So if you're working on a solution, if you're a startup, if you're working on a really tricky spot, we'd love to hear from you. And equally, at ARENA, we think that the opportunity for vehicle to grid, in fact, vehicle to everything, is large. And if we can unlock some of those structural barriers around standards, around market access, around vehicle warranties, really think this is a large opportunity to take advantage of.
Well, in the power sector, Australia's done so much with variable renewable electricity, and, you know, sort of famous for the the rooftop solar phenomenon and the solar soaker thing with the battery rebate program, I guess we could see cars as batteries on wheels soon, and then them also being a resource which discharges and supplies X, as you say, all the things.
Absolutely. Best way to think of it, it's a battery on wheels with the car thrown in for free.
So aside from driving down emissions, transport's a big deal for the economy. Talk to us a little bit about the scope and scale of it, the critical role of the transport sector.
Yeah, great points. I'll start with emissions, and that's because there's over 100 million tonnes of emissions from the transport sector each year. It's around a fifth of Australia's total pool. And so, large pool. It's also a varied sector. The solution for the passenger vehicle market is quite different to the international shipping market. So you're dealing with electrons and molecules as the solutions to decarbonise. And you're also dealing with groups that are ready to move now and those that are ready to move in the future. So the pool is quite large, and unfortunately, we're dealing with a trend that's against us. If you go back to 2005, we're actually up 23% on the total emissions pool, and it's the largest growth rate of any sector. So the good news is that this rate of change has slowed in recent years, and that's largely off the back of increasing passenger vehicle EVs. The bad news is that we're not reducing this rate of emissions fast enough. And there's two key factors at play. The first is that we have growing population and growing demand for freight. And that means that even if you reduce the average intensity of any mode of transport, the total volume of transport is increasing. So you've got to work against that as well. And the second is that some sectors, like aviation and maritime, are hard to electrify. And that requires technology breakthroughs to ensure that there's a cost-effective solution. So what it boils down to is there's a lot to do, and there are different actions required in different sectors. The real question is, where should we focus?
Okay, so to sort of summarize, what I heard was transport's a big bucket of emissions, 1/5 or something. Unlike, say, power sector, transport sector is actually still growing, whereas power's probably been getting better with switching to renewables.
Yeah, that's right. There's a bit of a two-horse race to 2030. You've got the power sector, which is a larger base and declining. It's a race that the transport sector doesn't want to win, though.
And you've got lots of bits and parts of the transport sector that are quite varied, from aviation to personal vehicles. And the big chunk that's focus of ARENA is this heavy-duty vehicle freight sector. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We've been focusing on heavy road transport for a few years now, and it boils down to sort of a Venn diagram of, is the size of the prize big enough? We've established that the freight task in particular is quite large. That also covers trucks, but also light commercial vans and others that are smaller but in volume, they actually produce quite a few emissions. The next part of the Venn diagram is the technology. And what we've seen is that increasingly battery electric vehicles are cutting through. And in the passenger vehicle market, that sales are accelerating. We can see that moving up the duty cycle, so that vans and lighter trucks are quite ripe for the transition to electric vehicles. And then the last question is on the commercials and what do we do about the cost? And often we get asked, well, there's an upfront premium. How are people supposed to bridge that? One of the tools that we use to assess the commercialization pathway is this total cost of ownership of vehicles in particular. And what we found that, yes, while battery electric vehicles do have that higher upfront cost, for those modes of transport that have high travel requirements, and they can actually get the benefit of the operational savings from moving to electricity, that they're increasingly moving to total cost of ownership parity or better. So between those three factors, that's why we think freight's a really exciting place for the movement in the energy transition.
Lots to unpack there. But going back a bit, just on the smaller trucks, the lighter duty vehicles, but not the passenger vehicles, I saw a really compelling pitch at an Energy Lab event in Sydney a while ago of a garbage truck unit that was sort of looking to replace that segment, but they needed big buys, like sort of fleet scale purchases by city councils and such. Is that sort of one of the dynamics in that whole freight transport sector, that you've got to address a whole fleet, or are there some individual ownership cases as a customer class?
Yeah, it's a great call out. The freight sector is really dominated by some large entities with large fleets, and then a long tail of groups with only a handful of vehicles. So you've got a dynamic where we've supported fast movers and the larger companies up front, but then how do you actually address the 98% of fleets that with only a handful of trucks in their fleet? And what we're hearing is that there are new business models as well to aggregate the demand and make sure that they can bring sort of that expertise to a larger class.
And then I guess going to the total cost of ownership point you made, that's going to become a financing problem because lots of mom and pop shops, this long tail you describe of fleet owners, probably can't cough up the millions of dollars it takes to buy an electric truck of some class, and they need a bank to provide a loan for it. Is that one of the challenges that you're finding and fixing?
Yeah, I think there's probably two elements there. There's finance and education. And on the financing piece, you're absolutely right that not many people actually purchase their vehicles upfront with cash. So financing is a key lever that we have in the energy transition. Now, that comes down to who has the finance, who's willing to lend it, and what are the terms. And one of the dynamics we found with the freight sector is that there's quite a low estimate of what the residual value is of these vehicles over time. So one of the opportunities in this sector is for those who have a strong view on what the residual value could be in 5 years, who can work with capital providers to offer a 5-year lease term, that all of a sudden becomes quite an offering that people can take up.
So the education is kind of the finance class. You need bankers and others to get smart about this stuff.
It's all around. Let's start with the finance sector, but also the operators. There's a lot of early wins just by getting stuck in, taking your first electric vehicle and putting it into the fleet. What we do find is often a sustainability professional will actually take the concept to us first and say, this is important. We think electrifying our fleet's the very first step. And then have you talk to your CFO? And then you go to the finance team and they say, well, the economics don't quite stack up. And we say, great. Arena can help with that. Some other parts of the government can help with that. Then they turn to the operations team and say, great, we've got the finance. We think it's a good thing. Can you make it work? And their eyes roll and they figure it out. At least some of the great teams have really been doing that work for the last couple of years. And so when you do get the operations team, the sustainability team, the finance team all in the same boat, and they can do the hard yards and figure out, actually, we can make this work, they're the type of dynamics that make a winning transition.
So where do you get all those players all at one place? I heard you were recently at Truck Show X or something or other. It sounds like the sort of X marks the spot where you might find all the right people in the room and get them talking to each other about those things.
Yeah, I don't think you can find one spot in Australia where you throw a blanket over everyone that can help the transition in transport. But Truck Show X isn't a bad place to start. A wonderful event organised by the HVIA, and it brought together all of those groups I mentioned, but also the electric vehicle suppliers and the charging infrastructure specialists and experts who know how to bring this all together and develop projects. So when you get that group together and there's the right dynamic there, I'd expect we get some wonderful concepts emerging from that event.
And just acronym check there, HVIA is Heavy Vehicle Industry Association, I'm assuming, for
it is,
Australia.
Yes, it's the Heavy Vehicle Industry Association, yes.
And, was the show kind of as cool for truckies and people that like big Mack and Daimler and other truck types as the Beijing Auto Show? I saw some footage of that this year and kind of blew my mind with the luxury vehicles.
You'll be hard pressed to match the scale of the Beijing Auto Show, but in terms of what the Truck Show X event brought, it was meeting the trucking sector where it is, which is finding those representatives who actually day-to-day do the operations, figuring it out. Sometimes you go to an energy conference and people talk at large about what the trucking sector needs to do. But if you're not going to where these groups actually operate, you're probably not going to get that cut through you need.
So Alex, take us there. Who at Truck Show X did you get to meet from the arena community?
So, Danny, one of the great things about an event like Truck Show X is it brings together all the different groups who are looking to drive impact. And Arena's fortunate to have actually worked with 3 of those groups who we'll hear from shortly The first is NewVolt, and they're a company looking to develop charging infrastructure hubs off-site that make it easier for groups to start their electrification journey. We'll also hear from Zenobē, who are working with fleets and actually unpacking all of the steps it takes to switch from diesel to electric with a focus on last mile delivery. And finally, we'll hear from EcoRoute Advisory, who have a modelling tool which provides a lot of the smarts behind the decision to electrify a fleet and can undertake some quite complex computations to end up with quite a simple solution.
The motivations of all these companies you met, they're the same sort of go-to-market right now, ready to roll? Yeah,
so these groups, and they're wonderful companies. Some are small, some are a bit larger. They really have some of the most talented people in Australia working on this challenge. They are there for the right reasons. They understand the overall imperative. We're here to drive down emissions, but equally they understand that this only works at the speed and scale we need if it makes commercial sense over time, and they're looking at all the different structural barriers required to overcome it. So they're a wonderful cohort.
Great, let's go meet them.
Anthony Headlam, CEO and one of the co-founders of NewVolt. NewVolt's developing a fast charging network to support the adoption of electric trucks across the road freight industry. We're here at Truck Show X in the Hunter Valley at the moment. Behind we've got a whole lineup of electric trucks from different OEMs. NewVolt was at this same conference 2 years ago, and 2 years ago everyone was amazed. Hey, wow! Look, there's an electric truck. So the first observation is 2 years later, that's not new or novel. There's a widespread acceptance. Electric trucks are here. They are the pathway to decarbonise. The conversation has now moved on to where do we start? What's the use cases for which truck, and how do we unlock it? And the unlocking bit is obviously where NewVolt comes in. We're developing the network, which we see really as foundational infrastructure to support electrification. So for me I think what's changed is an appreciation that the pathway is clear, and now we're far more in the detail of which technology, precisely where, precisely when do we start. So NewVolt's starting its national network in Melbourne with 3 major truck charging hubs, and we're very grateful for support from ARENA to help make that happen. So for us, the goal is really to both at an infrastructure level to, I guess, show the market that there will be open access, specialised truck charging infrastructure that you can access. You don't have to figure all of that piece out yourselves. And then to work with our foundation customers who are coming on board in Melbourne to provide a platform and a replicable model for them to provide a pathway for decarbonisation nationally. So for myself and, to be honest, the whole NewVolt team, we're in this because we've all very genuinely become addicted to the problem we're trying to solve. And you can think about that problem in different ways. You can think about it as a decarbonisation problem, and from a decarbonisation lens, this is hard to abate. Now, it's not hard to abate because the technology isn't fit for purpose. Actually, that bit, with the trucks you can see behind me, has now been solved. It's hard to abate because of the complexity and the nuance of the industry. It's hard to abate because of the incredibly low margins that mean for operators to swap out old, in this case old diesel, for new electric, requires capital and requires a real challenge for them to swap that out. So the nuances and the complexity and why it's a hard and a hard problem to solve, but a really fascinating problem to solve, is in all of that complexity. And I think for NewVolt, whilst we're building a fast charging network is the core proposition and a really important proposition for the market, actually most of our conversations with the market, with our customers, with fleets are about trucks, they're about economics, they're about operations, they're about all the other layers that go on top of, yes, charging, but all of those other layers to unlock electrification. And that's, to be honest, a really fun problem that we love solving. Look, we're 7 years in. Maybe when we started this journey, we were on the crazier end of early versus crazy. We were closer to crazy. These days, I think people recognise this is really important. There's lots of others like us now who are really trying to push this industry towards electrification, and we're glad to be working with them.
So I'm Marceline Overduin. I'm the founder of EcoRoute Advisory. The opportunity I saw for EcoRoute Advisory was filling a data gap in terms of what happens when you go from a traditional fuel like diesel to an alternative fuel like battery electric, whether that's fully battery electric or battery electric in a hybrid configuration. So you've got diesel prime mover unit and battery powered trailer. That data gap around the fuel savings, but also the time savings, is something where EcoRoute Advisory, through rapid route feasibility assessments, can take the guesswork out of the benefits and quantify that for operators to make it tangible. There's a lot of interest in industry in this type of analysis, but also in the fuel savings and the operational savings, so the time that it takes. Really seeing that at the moment with the fuel crisis, which is an unfortunate way to motivate change. But operators are starting to warm up to the idea that alternative fuels can be a really beneficial thing in their fleets. So having spent yesterday at Truck Show X, there's some really exciting technology that's coming onto the market. So like the system from vMotion, where operators have a wider array of options available to them. If battery electric on its own doesn't work for them, that's okay. There's another option available, which is their prime mover unit coupled with a battery powered trailer. So they still get those fuel savings, but they also get time savings. So they're getting the best of both worlds. That's also to say that as the technology progresses, there's going to be work to do in the regulation space to make that nationally consistent, which is something that Europe has excelled in. But also to make it commercially viable, which I think is where ARENA is really providing a helping hand to industry to get those trucks on the road and to the trailers as well.
Hi, I'm Gareth Ridge, Country Director for Zenobē across Australia and New Zealand. At Zenobē, we're trying to make decarbonisation easy and simple for our customers, and that's whether it's a commercial challenge, a financial challenge, or whether it's the technical challenge of whether it's charging infrastructure or the vehicles itself. So we try to come with the mentality of what are the barriers to adoption, what are the barriers that our customers are seeing, and how can we work with them on those different parts or different challenges and break them down so that it's all solvable. We get to find a challenge that's, that can't be solved through whether it's an engineering or a commercial model design, but that's really our philosophy. It's been what we've done over 7 or 8 years ago with our first project in the UK, and now we're 6 years in Australia, where we really just work closely with the customer, understand what they need, and then work backwards from that. So this project came about through Winnings trying to decarbonise its fleet, and it operates from port all the way through to customer. They operate a lot of heavy weights or loads in their vehicles, and so they wanted to try and decarbonise that and understand how they could do that in the best way possible. We worked closely with Winnings to understand what we could do in that space and what vehicles were available, and how we could support them with the charging infrastructure and the whole commercial model that goes with that. The commercial model that we're working with Winnings on is we call it a turnkey provision or turnkey services for them. That's where we take care of everything from the design of the project or the infrastructure, working with them so they understand what vehicles are required and the routes that the vehicles can do and the battery capacity of those vehicles. Through to the deployment of those vehicles and the infrastructure that goes with it. We also then do the ongoing operation and maintenance components of that, and then we wrap that whole service up under a financed package for Winnings so that they can turn the CapEx into an OpEx payment, and they can make it stack up from a total cost of ownership basis so that it's comparable to what they were operating on their diesel model to now under an electric model. And it's that switching a lot of these high upfront costs which are associated with the electric trucks and associated with charging infrastructure, that we can now spread that over a longer period of time with the customer and to make it stack up and be comparable to what they would have been paying on a monthly basis for their diesel. The insights that will come out of this, I think, will be quite far-reaching. Mainly the fact that Winnings are operating a very heavy-weighted load, so they've got appliances that they're putting on these trucks and delivering them to the end customer, and the fact that they've got multiple sizes of fleet. So they already had some vans, now they're going 4.5 tonne trucks, there's 8.5 tonne trucks, and they've also got a prime mover separate to this project. So looking at how it works across multiple trucking classes, but also how they operate in very heavy duty ranges, not just ranges, sorry, heavy duty cycles in terms of how much weight are on these vehicles. And I think that will provide an additional layer of confidence to the sector that it's not just moving lighter goods, that it actually can be used in all applications, not just in particular types of applications where it might stack up.
What great stories, and what a wonderful cohort of companies. What is it that ARENA is going to do for them, and how can you continue to support this sector getting the innovation in V2X and infrastructure and fleet electrification?
So I'm often asked what makes a great project that ARENA supports, and I always point to three factors. The first is impact. Are you going to make a change? Is there a meaningful difference as a result of this project? The second is conviction. Do you have a strong basis for this? Have you brought others on the journey? Have they done the work to understand and really bring that consortium together? And the last piece is a plan. It's all well and good to understand the idea, but if you are able to then execute on that, that's always the genesis that we look to work with those groups, and they're the ones that we really enjoy working with.
And the ones with a plan can go to arena.gov.au, look up Driving the Nation and apply or seek support or get into that knowledge bank that you've mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Best first port of contact is our website, arena.gov.au. Equally, we go out to market. We're visible in the space. We want to be out there and undertaking business development. Please reach out as you can.
Yeah, and help us respond to this heightened fuel security time that we're in and get us moving to electric everything and driving the nation forward.
Absolutely.
To conclude, I guess, just what's the one that's exciting you right now? Or what are you sort of seeing out there, Alex, from Truck Show X or elsewhere that's really the sort of thing you think we need to do more of?
Yeah, I think we're at a real tipping point with electrification of the freight sector. You've got models available in the country. You've got fleets who have had that first pass and looking to go again. You've got customers who acknowledge that this is now no longer just a decarbonisation play, but it's a reliability and security of stock issue as well. And you've got financiers who understand that this is a big thing. It's thematic, that won't go away. And so when you get those groups all working together and trying to find a solution, I think we're really on the cusp of something special here.
Yeah, sounds like it. And just in time too, because I know we're going to need to make sure we can bring the food from the bush to the cities and get all those parties around the same solution. So good on you. Thank you for telling us about the transport sector work at ARENA and explaining how it all works.
Thanks, Danny.
That's it for this episode of ReWired. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation about how bold ideas become real change in Australia's clean energy future. We'll see you next time with more stories from Australians stepping into the arena and shaping what comes next. Until then, find out more about how ARENA is helping shift the dial on Australia's journey to net zero by following us on LinkedIn or visiting arena.gov.au.